Thank you for joining us on the Winning at Selling podcast. I'm Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems, and with me is Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute.
What's the most important step in the sales process? Some say the first one, others respond with the interview step. Seasoned salespeople reply with the close. All of these are important, but without active listening, you will not make a difference in someone's life by selling them your best offering and could make their lives even worse. So listen up as Bill and I address active listening and other great ideas on episode 531 of the Winning at Selling podcast.
I kind of missed what you said. I was thinking of something else.
Sorry, you were drifting off. I
drifted.
I got to keep in mind 3 seconds with some people. They can't listen past 3 seconds without you asking them a question and engaging them. But I think we'll talk about that a little bit later.
I'm sorry. I don't listen to you a lot anymore.
Turn your video off and then listen to the voice. People are so distracted. What's in the background there? I'm not
three
listening
things.
to you.
Three things going on, right? I'm trying to think while I'm listening to something else, and then I can't believe I missed 5 minutes.
That blur background is so important. It's like just distracts everybody with ADD and ADHD and everything that's distracting. Right.
Well, that's good. Let's get into the book, How Clients Buy. We're at part 3, chapters 14 and 15. Just want to remind everybody of the process that the authors illustrate on page 91. That is 7 steps, I think. Aware, understand, interest, respect, trust, able, and ready. So all about buying, right? I'm aware of you. I understand what you're offering. I'm interested in it. I have respect for you and your organization. I trust that you can deal with it. And now we're going to go into, I am able to buy and I am ready to buy. So chapter 14, element 6, I am able, I've got budget and buy-in. So I've got money to spend and I've got buy-in from the other people. At least that's what I claim. And you and I both know that sometimes customers lie to us. So
they do.
I'm much more important than I am.
Right. And then you go, well, I need to involve some other people. Wait a minute. I thought you said you were the decision maker.
That happens.
No, I am.
That happens at the close, right?
Right. Yeah.
So let's sign this up. Well, and then you screwed up. So, All right. So the authors start by, I thought this was interesting because you and I have talked about pre-qualifying. So they started with 3 pages discussing some great ways to pre-qualify prospects. And then they spent the rest of the chapter saying, do not pre-qualify prospects.
Little irony there, huh?
Well, these guys confuse me sometimes because they're spending a lot of times not being salespeople. But I do think it's true that we don't want to overly qualify prospects. And their point in this is while we want to make sure they have the budget, sometimes we're just going into this to create relationships and build business for the future. I think we need to be careful with that because there's a lot of people out there that will steal our time and our knowledge and use it with somebody else. So while you're out there building relationships, they're using your knowledge. So be careful that you don't do any qualification at all. And so they did. I would read the section, I think, and I won't pick out a page number, but about the 3rd page in the chapter, they do a little call out on 3 ways to pre-qualify that this person pre-qualifies their calls. Scott, have you ever gotten into a meeting and done such a good job, and then when you get into the appointment, they go, I really don't know why we're here.
Oh,
I really don't know that I feel a need, and you just got really good at making appointments.
Right. Yeah. Well, you make a lot of appointments. You kind of forget about what the point of the appointment is when you arrive.
I remember you and I had a client and they paid somebody to make appointments for them.
Right. Yeah.
And they ended up with a lot of crappy appointments because they paid for the appointment and not for a good appointment.
Right.
Not for a qualified appointment. So be careful how you spend your time if you don't want to do much pre-qualification, because you may get somebody that doesn't have the budget and doesn't have the buy-in.
Right. So true.
So I think it's good. Meet, network people. Just be realistic about your expectations of the meeting. But for me, the key in pre-qualification is to avoid getting stuck, as we mentioned at the beginning, with the first person you meet. And then as a salesperson, you never drive to other people that may have more power.
I think creating urgency in that first appointment is really important. And creating urgency is not being too anxious to take on a job or to sell something, but to really find out why is it so important now, and for the prospect to be able to uncover what happens if they don't take any action. And then they start recognizing the value that you're offering in your solution.
Right.
And, if they say, we'd like to get it done by the end of the month, you say, oh, I'm not by the end of the month. Okay. Might have to rearrange some things. I'm kind of curious, why is the end of the month so important? And now you're really getting them to uncover their motivations, and you then know what's important to them. And then you keep reminding them what's important to them. And I think salespeople kind of leave that out as what's most important to the prospect and then remind them about it later.
Yeah. And I think that's one step that in all of their steps here, they're assuming these things happen without you driving it. And I think your questions are very valid. We have to drive with questions, and we have to be creative in our questioning about budget and about ability to buy. Now, they have a magic formula. It's really magic. You can prove a high ROI, return on investment, and you're talking to the right level of stakeholder, and then they can buy. So, but you don't find out these things unless you ask the kind of questions that Scott just mentioned. When do you need this done? What's your budget for this? Some of those questions can be embarrassing and embarrass the person there because they don't have those things in mind yet. But that forces them to start to make those considerations.
Right. Good questions.
So they talk about the tactics. I like their tactics. Meet with people and ask thoughtful questions to discover whether they're at the right level, drive higher in the organization to the decision maker. So those are good sales process.
I think a little callback from the past books, the Challenger Sale. We know that people make a lot of decisions internally now with their team and not just one decision maker. So find out about the process they're going to go through when they make a decision, and that's involving other people too.
Excellent point. All right. Chapter 15 says, it's element 7. I am ready and the timing is right. And that's the big one in the middle of their chart, saying we're going to get this going. And they talk about timing being right and timing being wrong. And it seemed to me that they kind of talk a lot about excuses for why the timing is wrong, right? They have a lot of excuses. My boss just changed. We have a new initiative. We lost a lot of money in the market. Our market cap went down. We're firing people instead of hiring. We're not going to use outside consultants for a while. All those things can be true, but they also lend, for me, to the question of, did this problem go away because your market cap went down? Did this problem suddenly disappear? You really didn't identify a key issue or a key challenge that's really costing them money. If the new boss says, well, I don't care about that money, you need to make sure that this is an issue that's big enough that it transcends one or two people.
Yeah, I think it's also important for the prospects, to be able to know the value of your offering. And if they don't know the value of your offering, then everything else is going to have a larger, higher priority with it. But if it's important to your prospect and the value is there, they'll find a reason and they'll make it a priority to make a change and to make a purchase. But the problem is that when it becomes unimportant, it doesn't have value, and then other things become more important, and then your solution loses its value. And that's just, the prospect doesn't see the value at the time. Remind them of the value at the time.
Right. And I do think we hit these bumps in the road of some things and that cause people to lose their focus, personnel changes, changing priorities, et cetera. Now, they talked a lot about permission marketing. They really kind of like this permission marketing, which I call trickle marketing. If I get a customer that gives me a 6-month or a 1-year time frame, their name goes over to marketing, and we start to trickle information to them on a regular basis, articles, support, things like that, before I re-engage them again, maybe 5 months later if they have a 6-month time frame. You're still going to lose business that way because somebody else is going to come in there right at the right time, and they tell a story that's an example of that. But I do think that people are doing things online. They're keeping up with good information, and they talk about their tactics. Be patient and continue to serve. Stay close and look for the moment.
I'm working with a company right now, and the prospects are calling and past customers are calling and they're saying, do you have anything new? And the salesperson, then ends up talking to the CEO of the company going, do we have anything new? And then I get involved and then my question to the salesperson is, well, what do they know about the products that we offer right now? Well, I don't know. I said, find out what the problem is that they're working with or the goal that they want to establish, then figure out a way to solve it with our existing products. You assume that all of our customers know everything there is to know about what we're offering, and they really don't. You as a salesperson know, and you as a salesperson know that there has not been a new product put out into the marketplace for a year or 2 years. But what is the goal that the prospect is wanting to solve? Focus on what we have, sell what we have, and solve what we have based on our products and services and the problems and goals that our prospects have. So keep that in mind
Yeah.
too.
I think salespeople do get trapped in I want to sell the newest thing, and sometimes customers ask for what is the newest thing, and therefore we don't. The newest thing isn't out yet necessarily,
Right.
and so now what are we going to do? Tell the customer to wait 6 months till we get the next level, the newest thing, or are we going to talk to them about their issues and see how we can solve it today, and then maybe upgrade them at a later time? So.
Right.
Good point, Scott. Good points on the book. I like this book. I do think they're a little bit in dream world somewhere about selling. I think they assume selling happens if you do everything right, and I think that can be true, but I'm not sure they do everything right. So anyway, next week we're going to talk about part 4. We're going to move on from part 3 to part 4, chapter 16 and 17. If you haven't bought the book, you're not going to get the most out of these conversations. So let's move on.
As I mentioned in the opening, active listening is the most important sales technique that you can apply, period. Without it, you do not have trust, you have not established rapport, and you will never receive accurate information from prospects, no matter what questions you ask, because the prospect will always answer in a way that puts them in the best light. So I want to share with our listeners 10 techniques that you can apply. And I want to ask Bill to comment on them and learn about his experience in active listening when it comes to working with prospects and customers. And the first one should be pretty simple. If those of you that are playing along at home want to guess what the first one is, it's pretty simple. Shut up. I think salespeople talk too much. When I was a member of the National Speakers Association, it seemed like we had 3,000 members and no listeners. And everybody had an opinion and everybody had a way of doing it, but they had no concept of what the challenge or the goal was before they started solving a problem. And sometimes salespeople can be assumptive by talking a lot. So shut up, open your eyes and open your ears and close your mouth first. You can hear what the other person has to say if you give them a chance to really talk. Bill, have you experienced this at all with salespeople that you've worked with?
What's the old saying? You have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you should use them in that ratio.
Right.
I have a problem with this because I'm a know-it-all and I'm a trainer. So trainers know everything. So one of the things I have to be careful of is that I give them a chance to talk. So I write SU at the top of my paper, and frequently during the conversation to remind myself of this point that you're making, that I need to not interrupt, not stop them, but to let them talk and try to guide them a little bit. So I believe this is important.
Yeah. Number 2 is show the other person respect. You must have and also show a sincere concern for what the other person has to say. Don't succumb to your own perceived ideas or opinions that would keep you from being open to ideas from them. And I think in our political nature right now, this is a tough one with picking sides and knowing what team you're on and not listening to the other team.
Yeah, Scott, you and I had a client that we shared recently. We were working on a project together, and Scott and I, you might have gathered, are a little bit conservative. This was a very liberal organization, good people, but very liberal in their mindset. But it really showed that there were times, Scott, that you and I just had to bite our tongue, and there would be a political opinion thrown out, and we just didn't bite. Right? We didn't have to comment. We didn't have to say anything. We just didn't bite and start, chomping at the bit to say something or argue with them. So, your customer has a chance to say whatever they want, but you don't have that opportunity to say whatever you want. So be careful, be quiet, and let them have their opinion, especially as you say, Scott, in this politically charged atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. Number 3 is listen for the truth. Evaluate what is being said without regarding for who is saying it. And one thing that I always stress with salespeople is listen for the intent behind the content. What is most important to them? And looking at number 2, when we talk about showing the other person respect, I heard a great quote. I think it was from Walt Disney's brother. I can't remember his first name, Fred or something like that. And the quote is, when your values are clear, your decisions are easy. And when we think about our values and we listen for our prospects' values, listen for the truth. And if there's nothing to win, then practice number 1, shut up, because there's nothing to win. Don't argue with people.
I think also you have to question for the truth.
Yeah,
and
qualify.
this is why that I really feel you need to write down 10 good questions that can get you started and can help you drive, as you said, you mentioned the challenger sale, to challenge them for the truth. When they say something off kilter, you go, well, tell me how that works. Let's dive into that a little bit more. And they have to come up and themselves and say, oh, wait, maybe I'm thinking wrong. So don't assume that they're thinking right. And if you hear something that sounds off, challenge them a little bit on it and ask them to define it more. Challenge them a little bit and ask them to define it more closely.
Right, in an empathetic, nurturing way, so that they don't feel
no, like a jerk.
Like
what the hell do you mean by that?
Yeah,
right.
Why are you doing it that way? That's so stupid.
Yeah, that's right. There's a big difference between why would you do that and tell me why you do that. Right. So your tone and how you say things can be very effective as you listen.
Yeah, very true. I think number 4 is important too. Don't interrupt the other person. In sales, just like in negotiations, and there's a lot of overlap between the two, information is the most important step in any conversation, is getting information. If they're talking, don't interrupt them. Let them finish, ask questions about and make comments, but let them finish their thought, and you get to gain more knowledge and understanding about where they're coming from and what they're saying.
Yeah, once they get going, you're a fool to stop them. Because the more they say, the more they trap themselves, and the more they forget they were going to tell you a little bit of a lie here and there. And when you interrupt them, it gives them a chance to start thinking about what they were going to hide. So let them talk and just nod and make your notes and keep things moving forward.
Yeah, very good point. Number 5 is don't speak for more than 30 seconds without asking for comments or seeking feedback or making sure that they're still engaged and they're still with you. And sometimes body language is really important. And when we're doing more on Zoom or Teams or over the internet via our cameras on are going to make it a lot easier for us to be able to read body language. So studies have shown that if we're not asking a question within 30 seconds, people start to drift off and wander a little bit, which is part of the opening monologue that Bill and I had, is we want to engage them. And as speakers and trainers, we know that we have to engage the audience every 8 to 12 minutes in order for them to stay tuned in to what we're talking about and what we're presenting, in order for them to retain and apply the information. And guess where this started, this process of 8 to 12 minutes, Bill?
TV.
Exactly.
Television commercials.
So programmed to be able to be intent and concentrate and give our full attention during a program, and then wait for the commercials to come up, and that's our break. So always be engaging your audience and seeking more information.
Now, our listeners, I want you to time that. I think he talked for about a minute and a half there before he talked about.
So but that's the example is how many people tuned me out. I tuned you out, Professor. I know. See, it works. I'm right.
All right.
Number 6 is don't think about your response while the other person is talking. This is very normal. Salespeople get very uncomfortable about silence, and they want to always be controlling the conversation, which is not bad, but use silence to your advantage and let the other person feel the silence. If they did not ask you a question, and then they continue to talk, you'll be surprised what gold there are in their hills when they start talking after you don't respond because they never asked you a question. So pause, make sure that the prospect shares everything, and they're going to share more information. And that's what you're really looking for.
In the top corner of my question list that I prepare, I put in little questions that I can ask during these moments where where I would generally be trying to think of my response. Again, the questions are really good because they keep me from having to think about my response all the time because I know where I want this conversation to go. But I also put little questions up in the corner like, tell me more. How do you mean that? Really? That's interesting. And those little comments allow you to stay involved in the conversation without taking over the conversation.
Yeah.
And I think those are very helpful to not think about my response, as you mentioned, while they're talking, but just think about, I'll use these little things, and they're all written down so I can listen to them closely and not think about my response. So,
yeah, those reverses are really important. And one of my favorite ones is just one word, and they keep going. and they keep going. All right. Number 7 is try to understand from the other person's point of view. So listen for the intent and find out what their point of view is. And this is where you're really practicing that empathetic listening. And empathy is understanding a position from the prospect's point of view and not your point of view. And then you're able to see where they're coming from and what's most important to them. So listen for their point of view.
Yeah, it's not a contest. This isn't a one-upmanship. You tell me something, I tell you something better. You tell me something better than that. We've been involved in those kind of conversations. That's not showing empathy. That's showing I can one-up you. I can ask you a better question. I can drive deeper. When you're really trying to understand their point of view, you're really listening to them and thinking about them and thinking about the situation they're put in rather than thinking about yourself and how you're going to elicit a better response.
Right. Yeah. Number 8 is verbalize the other person's comment before responding. So this paraphrasing is really important because it shows that you are listening, you're understanding some of the emotions that people are sharing with you and the words that they charge and they emphasize when they share information with you. And then when you repeat it back to them in the same tone, they know that you're picking up what they're putting down. And when you're understanding where they're coming from, it makes it easier for both of you to be on the same page. And when you take a step, they take a step. And when you take a step, they take a step. And now we understand accurately where we're going together. So common goal, mutual commitment. And we're following that as we're continuing our conversation.
Yeah, I think that's good. And you put in your notes, don't stare them down. And I think that's
right.
This isn't an interrogation. You don't have them under the hot lights. This is a conversation. So make sure that you keep it conversational as you're driving your questions and challenging them. It's how you say things and the friendliness you have that helps them to be more honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's number 9 is keeping good eye contact and making sure that when you're communicating, eye contact shows that you're listening, but don't stare them down. It's not a contest. I had a boss one time that just loved to just stare you down, and it was just very intimidating. And every time I talked to him, it was just a constant stare the whole time. Now, I know that was not his intent because that's not the type of person that he was, but it was very intimidating when he just kept staring at you the whole time.
Yeah. Do you have compassionate eyes or do you have challenging eyes? We're very good at reading body language as people. We don't interpret it thoughtfully. We don't interpret it in the front part of our brain, but somewhere in the back, as you're saying, he wasn't looking at me with compassion. He was looking at me with challenge. And so your eye contact, the way you come across to people can be very open or it can be very challenging. How are you going to do that?
Yeah. And then the last one, number 10, is respect the other person's point of view. You may not agree with them, but they have their right to their opinions and their ideas just like you do. And this might be a little redundant from other ones, but really keep that in mind, is just respect the other person's point of view. If there's nothing to win, then don't challenge them. If there is something to win, and in some cases, prospects share information with you that is not going to make your relationship easier going forward. And you need to qualify that statement. You need to uncover that belief, and you need to be able to challenge them on it for them to consider other options. Because if you don't do it at that time, at that moment, it's going to be an objection later on. And I know this when I'm interviewing prospects, and I'm selling services, if I don't deal with an objection before a proposal, it's definitely going to come up after the proposal.
It's going to come up
And we need
sometime.
it really is. And right now, there's a mindset that, there's an economy, there's inflation, a recession, there's supply chain.
We're making up all the excuses before the customers
we really
can.
are. And if the unemployment rate is at 6%, then we know that 94% of the people are working. Now, of course, the numbers are open to interpretation and how they're measured, of course, but there is a majority of opportunities out there. Our goal is to find them. But if we have a belief that everybody's suffering and nobody has any money and inflation and recession and everything's stalled it out, then we're going to live to that belief. And as leaders, as sales managers, we need to challenge salespeople and say there are opportunities in them, their hills. We need to go out and find them. So I'm not going to be buying excuses from you, salespeople, as to why you're not making your goal and your quota. Find a way to find a prospect that's willing to buy from you today, and continue to do that every single day.
Yeah, let me go through. I have a few rules for better listening as well. I think they're an echo of what you've outlined, although there might be a couple here that aren't quite similar. I have let them finish speaking, which you talked about. Number 2, give every indication that you're listening. That's where I use the eye contact comes into that. Nod, how you're watching them. I use sounds. Really? Right? Little things that indicate I'm still tied into them. I don't listen in a total silence, because I think that then they get nervous on that. My third one is take notes. This is a big one. I think this answers a lot of problems. If you're taking notes, you're not thinking about what you're going to respond. If you're taking notes, you're learning more. If you're taking notes, you have an opportunity to paraphrase and run it back to them. So taking notes is very crucial. I can guarantee you won't remember. I've never had anybody tell me it was rude to take notes, that I'm not listening. No, they know I'm listening better, and it shows that the conversation is important. So take notes. Taking notes will help you. It's also where I write SU a lot. Shut up, to myself, not to them. So number 4, think about their comments, not your response, which we talked about. Hold off evaluating. This one is a big one as well. You're not trying to change them, fix them, tell them your service right in the middle of their conversation. Hold off evaluating and starting to solve the problem in the middle of the conversation. You keep the customer center stage. And one thing I talk about, don't give away your solution. When you do, you start sucking the energy out of the conversation. So again, it's part of shut up, but hold off that evaluation and that selling step. You talked about clarifying and paraphrasing. I think that's crucial. And then I talk about leading the conversation, and that means having prepared questions and then listening to the customer. One of the problems with prepared questions is I'll ask a question that isn't pertinent to the way the conversation is going if I'm not listening to them, right? So listen, use your prepared questions as a guide, but they're not an ironclad, I need to ask this question next. They may have answered that question. Go on to question 4 and 5 and 6, right. or follow along with what they're saying and ask a new question. Maybe you don't even have it written down, but it's the question that makes sense to move into this. So it's really how you prepare for this and to take notes and to really think about the customer. So I think we're really close on the way that we look at this listening issue.
Yeah. Communication is just so important, and it's a bit of an art and a science to practicing effectively as salespeople. So what resources do you have, Bill?
Well, I'm going to suggest one of my 2-minute selling tips, which are little 2-minute videos. Number 15, resist the urge. And you'll have to watch it to find out what the urge you need to resist is. Yeah.
A tease.
I'm
going to include a link to my reverses and softening statements, which are responses that salespeople can give when prospects are sharing information in order for the salesperson to get more information. So look for that in our show notes. And yep, that's one of them.
See, now Scott was tempted, was tempted to say something else.
I jumped right in. I took the bait. I really took the bait, Bill. It works. So, winningatselling.com, and this is episode 531.
All right, we'll finish with our golden nugget, and I think this one is apt. I've seen it both from Lou Holtz and Larry King. I never learned anything talking. And that is really true for your customers. When you're talking, your customers are the ones doing the learning. And you don't always have that much to teach them because, as Scott said early on, you haven't figured out what you're going to tell them about because you haven't listened well enough. So ask good questions, listen closely.
So everything we talked about will be at winningatselling.com.
Next week, our book club, How Clients Buy, Part 4, Chapters 16 and 17. And the topic is getting to a decision. Some people might call that closing. Getting to a decision. Please share, subscribe, share the podcast with your colleagues and on your social media. Go out and get better one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.